WarTech, Senko no Ronde, a title that is a translator's nightmare because it's French, English, and Japanese all at once. And while the title does sound a little bit like BattleTech, it's completely different. It's different. I mean, in BattleTech, you had mechs running around shooting at each other until they exploded. In WarTech, you have mechs flying around shooting at each other until they explode. How is this different from BattleTech? The most standout thing about WarTech is the concept behind the gameplay. Essentially, it's kind of like a cross between a one-on-one fighting game and a bullet hell shmup, and it's definitely a unique concept. However, I'm not necessarily convinced that it works all that well. Your characters have a wide variety of attacks, basic shots, lasers, barriers, a few special attacks, as well as ranged-based contextual attacks. So, if you were super close and used your basic shot, instead it would turn to a melee attack. On the basic level, this works very well. However, the biggest problem I noticed is it seems to use the entire 360 controller all at once. And honestly, if you don't have the manual to this game, especially when it comes to the power-up mode. Now, it wouldn't be a bullet hell shmup without some actual bullet hell, right? Well, you've got that in the form of boss mode. Boss mode is a temporary power-up you can activate twice per match, and your duration in boss mode is affected by how much of a super meter you've built up. And in this time, you are sending walls and walls of ordnance against your opponent. It's very empowering, it's very cool, and it's definitely one of the highlights of combat in this game. But one of the biggest problems about it is, at least to me, it felt like you were really just button mashing to just try and make something happen. I mean, take this one character. He's got a dash attack, which I found to be one of the most useful abilities, but I couldn't figure out how to activate it. So when it came down to using it, I was basically just hammering all the buttons hoping something would happen. That's not terribly good, and as a whole, this game isn't great at conveying its mechanics terribly well to you. It expects you to sort of understand as you go, and I'm not really sure that works terribly well with a system like this that seems kind of experimental in nature. Back to the boss mode for a minute though, there's a few things about it that are really cool. First off, you have sectional damage. If your boss takes a certain amount of damage in certain places, you'll actually lose cannons and the like. This works both ways because if you're on the defensive during this little mini phase, you can focus on one specific part of your opponent's armor and then create a blind spot where you're kind of untouchable. And that adds a little bit of strategy. I really appreciated that. While in boss mode, you also get a health augment to your character. You're not invincible, but you do get a lot more health. If your health gets whittled away, it will affect your standard form's health though. So that meant if you were on the offensive, you couldn't just go crazy. You had to still play a little bit defensively. And I really like the idea of giving someone a superpower but still requiring them to be smart about it. However, there is one serious flaw with boss mode, and that is, at least against a computer opponent, it really does show the massive flaw in the AI in this game. I would say fighting a computer opponent in this game is kind of similar to fighting a computer opponent in Marvel vs. Capcom. After one or two matches, you really sort of get a feel for what damage threshold an opponent will take before they activate boss mode. If you can get them down to that area and then activate boss mode yourself, they effectively can't do it. And because of that, you can make a fight incredibly one-sided very, very quickly. You know, provided you can actually use boss mode relatively competently. Now the story to this game is, well, balls if I can figure it out. Honestly, it feels like it's kind of a tie-in with an anime or manga, although I'm convinced there isn't one out there. And the reason I say this is because all the story you get is delivered through banter before and during a match. And they allude to greater events and intricacies between character interaction, backstory, relationships, just general world events, and the like. However, the game never goes into any of it. Like, seriously, just explain anything to me about this story. because this game will not do it. So honestly, this is one of those games where story is definitely not the high point. Although I would like to think it has to do something with giant metallic office stapler surfer mech here, trying to gain the right to use the title Silver Surfer before Marvel sues him into the ground. Yeah, see? Right there. Story. Easy. And it took me less than 20 seconds to come up with it. This game doesn't even give you that. So it's best to either completely ignore whatever story they give you, which honestly you'll probably be doing because you're not going to be paying attention to the subtitles while you're fighting, and honestly, whatever story they came up with, they don't explain it all that well anyway. The soundtrack is there, I think. Seriously, I don't remember any of it. There is voice acting in the native Japanese, but no English dub. For the demographic of most fighting games and bullet hell shmups, that's sort of what you'd expect. That's kind of what they like. And the game itself looks okay. It doesn't do anything stellar, but the robots look interesting enough, and the environments are varied to a certain extent. So I'd give its presentation a pass, if nothing else. But definitely the highlight of WarTech is its unique concept. And in a nutshell, that's WarTech. It's a conceptually unique little game, and it's definitely one worth picking up if you like bullet hell shmups or fighting games. Just make sure you've got someone to play it with, because the AI for the opponents definitely points out some of the bigger flaws in the mechanics. How it's certainly very experimental in nature, and because of this it definitely feels very clunky and overbearing at times. But if nothing else, it won't cost you very much. I got my copy for all of $2, and I think for just the experience of the interesting cross between fighting and bullet hell shmup gameplay that it provides, while it's certainly not the most well-polished game, and I wouldn't even say it's mechanically even a well-thought-out game, I think it was fun to play, and it's definitely a neat little curio to add to your Xbox 360 library.